Right, welcome everybody to the Environmental Implementation Committee, 8th of August 2024. Without any further ado, I will do a karakia. Tuia ke ronga, tuia te raro, tuia ke wahu, tuia ki roku, tuia ki te iri tangata, ka rongo te po, ta rongo te iro. Humiei, huiei, takia. Thank you. Do we have any apologies for this meeting? I think we do have a previous from Councillor Robinson like this. Do we have a mover? I'll move that. We have a seconder for the apologies. Councillor Alexa, I'll put that motion, those four. Yes, carried. Okay, the next agenda item is the public forum. No, we'll do that later on. Public forum. So a big welcome to Rebecca and to Grant. Yeah, I think we've got 5 minutes, but say what you need to say, and then there will be questions of clarification. So a big welcome. Thank you.
Excellent. Can everyone hear me? Is it coming through?
No.
Press the button. Yeah, thanks very much. So look, I'd just like to introduce Rebecca Shepherd. So Rebecca is the relatively new Chief Executive of the Southern Wood Council, and I think most of you are aware that my day job is Chief Executive of City Forests, but I've been the long-term Chairman of the Southern Wood Council. You've had some various communications from the Otago Forestry Group, which is all of the main forest owners within the Southern Wood Council. But what we've done is using the Southern Wood Council because it is a proper entity, registered entity, to formally communicate with the LRC with. So look, thank you for the opportunity to talk to us. To talk to this committee, and we just wanted to bring the forestry thing to the forefront again, and also just to make people aware of some developments which you may or may not be aware of. So the first page on the slide is just an intro to the Southern Wood Council, so I'll just take that as read. So obviously this is concerning the proposed land and water plan, which I think you're all fully aware forestry has some serious concerns over. But what we wanted to say here is that, and really the whole purpose of this discussion is to promote that National Environmental Standard for Commercial Forestry, recently reviewed NESCF, as a solution for everybody, really. So the first question there is the NESCF failing? And to the best of our knowledge, there's really no history of systematic non-compliance or systematic failure of those standards in Otago. We know there's been some minor misdemeanors, but there hasn't been a systematic failure. And I suppose in our interactions with the council, we've really been chasing the scientific evidence that may exist to put in place the stringency that's proposed under the version of the plan, which was the last one we saw, which was circa distributed in March. It may have changed since then, but we are unaware of that. So those 20-metre setbacks that were proposed and some of the other measures are, I think we've communicated that has drastic consequences for us. So we just want to make the point, and amongst all that water quality concerns around nitrogen, phosphorus and chloride, none of those things come out of commercial forestry to any great extent. In fact, the values produced by commercial forestry for those particular issues are largely the same as Indigenous or native forestry. Sediment. So it's well proven that sediment from commercial forestry is there or thereabouts the same as native forestry, depending on the catchment and the landform. But there is that window of vulnerability around harvest, and that's where the NESCF really concentrates, is trying to manage sediment from that. The other issue, which I understand is very important, is water yield, and understand that to a degree the science being relied on is a chunk of that's from the Glendoo study. And what's happening with that Glendoo study is that we know that water yield out of pine forest catchments is basically the same as native forest catchments. And that Glendhu study is a tussock catchment and a pine forest catchment. But what's happening is the two are trending together, because if you look at the data, because the tussock catchment is regenerating into manuka. So as that process happens over the decades, it just becomes the same. But there's this forest flow study from Cylon, which unfortunately is not published yet, but it's a next level of science again. So those water catchment studies that you may be relying on are they're VWEA catchment studies, and they just manage surface flows. The Cylon forest flow study, and there has been some interaction over that, is tracking water isotopes through the system. And what it's basically proving with regards to water yield is that commercial forestry, just like native forestry, intercepts a whole lot of rainfall, stops surface erosion, but it transmits that water down into the groundwater, which may pop up further down in the catchment. And that's why you see native forests effectively reducing the impact of floods, but also supporting low flows when there hasn't been much rain. And pine forests do the same thing. They do drink some water, we know that, but not as much as we think. A lot of it's getting transmitted to the root systems into the groundwater. So interesting fact there. Slash is another big issue, of course. And look, I just state that Otago is a really benign environment for slash. There hasn't been slash issues, and there won't be slash issues under the provisions of the NES. So really, for us, it comes down to that risk assessment. So I just wanted to, if on next slide, so I just want to point out what the NES covers, which is basically everything. It's just been amended to pick up wilding pines. A wilding pine assessment has to be done for every planting. It's amended to pick up carbon forestry, which was absent before, so that's been dealt with. And then there's a list there of all of the common forestry work practices that have standards. So we can flick past that due to time. Here's another really interesting, sorry, one back, please. Here's a really interesting one. So the NESCF, commercial forestry, is based around this erosion susceptibility class. And the key point here is that Otago is just a benign environment. So where you've seen all these issues in the North Island, that's on red zone land and up on the east coast. And Otago, it's 71% green, 26% yellow, 0.1% orange, and 0 red. We just don't have those soil types that are creating those big issues in the North Island. And there's where you can see it on the map there where they stand out, and that east coast area is certainly it. And it's also worthy of note too that the NES requires planting and harvest operations to be notified, which we are doing to your planning people, and often that's associated with an actual management plan, right? So on to the next slide. Compliance. Look, I just thought I'd talk about that. So your teams have been doing a lot of monitoring and enforcement, and particularly around harvesting. And the NES, as it stands, currently allows ORC to charge for that activity. I think there was a misconception in the council that that was not the case, and you needed a resource consent to charge. That's not that. My understanding is that is not the case. Look, there's a very thin history of non-compliance for monitoring, and in all instances that we're aware of, it's relatively minor. And I draw example. There was a recent non-compliance with Port Blakely, which turned out to be a slip in the native forest, not a pine forest issue. But City Forest itself, I can talk. I mean, we've effectively had 100% inspection of all our harvest sites over the last 5 years, and as that process has been going on, those inspections have become more and more thorough as the knowledge base of ORC staff comes up, and we've had no non-compliance. So it proves that the NES, as it stands as an instrument, is working pretty well on the fairly benign landscapes that are at Otago. But there have been some non-compliances, but we very much see those as they're not a result of a deficient NESCF. They're just, all they do is just represent a bell curve of compliance, and you see that in all industries. So the justification required for increased stringency. So we've really yet to see sufficient scientific evidence. So I know Phil Page from Galloway's has been writing to you guys to try and get the evidence, and we really haven't had sufficient evidence come back that justifies the additional stringency that is proposed above the NES. And we just draw attention to the fact that NES was a 9-year process to put that in place. And there's a significant amount of science behind it, which really needs to be taken into account by the ORC people, and we haven't seen that that's been done yet. The other issue is a cost benefit analysis. Now, our understanding is that under the RMA, there has to be a cost benefit analysis done to apply stringency. And you really need to engage with the forest industry to do that. I'm sure you're aware that we've written letters and we've been in the paper with concerns about the cost of the plan, and this is particularly centred around the interaction with the emissions trading scheme and the deforestation liabilities, but also the loss of productive land. So what we'd just like to draw your attention to is a recent court case between the Canterbury Regional Council and forest companies over very similar issues. And the court case recently ruled in favour of the forestry companies and supported the NES because ECAN could not justify enough scientific rigour or a cost benefit analysis to apply the increased stringency. And the point I want to make is that we would really like to engage and get this right, because there's so much money involved for us. If we don't get it right, we're just going to have to go straight to the High Court, and that's just going to waste our money. It's going to waste your money, and the ratepayers' money. It's going to affect small forest owners. So we're very, very keen to get this right before it's notified. So in conclusions, we're of the strong belief that the NESCF regulations are sufficient for Otago because the erosion susceptibility is low. And I would note that the NES already has provisions in it for councils to apply greater stringency on that red zone land, but there is no red zone land in Otago. Want to point out
we do have increased stringency in some areas like the Queenstown Lakes.
Yep.
Yeah.
So slash in Otago largely stays where it's put, and we also have a thriving bioenergy industry here, so a huge amount of it's actually getting used, unlike Gisborne, where there are no boilers that take that stuff. As I said just a moment ago, Section 32 of the RMA requires that stringency to be properly justified. We don't believe that's happened, and we would all, I think, like to avoid a nasty kind of bust up over it. And so I'd also point out that we haven't had an update to the proposed plan since March. I think you're aware forestry got left off the consultation, but then we got put back on at the last minute. But we're effectively flying blind as an industry on what is our single biggest risk. This is a bigger risk to us than fire, biosecurity, even the markets are not threatening the amount of economic carnage that the current plan will inflict on the industry. So we're of the strong belief that the right answer is already before you. It's the NESCF, nothing more, nothing less. And look, what we'd really like to do is to work with you folks to using science, using cost benefit analysis to help you reach the same conclusion. And with that, I think there's a meeting slot.
A council meeting slot on the 28th of August that we've penciled in. I guess if you saw fit, it would be nice to come back and talk the science through a wee bit more then. Yeah. If there was a chance to do that, we'd be very grateful. Yeah.
And it probably won't be me. I'm a chief executive. Like all chief executives, I skim this stuff. But there's a lot of science capability within the forest industry,
and particularly environmental science capability.
Within the Forest Owners Environment Committee that spans the whole country that we can draw on.
Cool.
Hopefully that was useful.
Thank you very much. Before I go to questions, so just a clarification. So you've approached council about appearing at our 28th.
I've emailed with Kylie and she said it's up to what you think today. We're penciled in for that council meeting on the 28th of August, unless you can think of another one that might be more appropriate.
Cool. Thank you. Yes, I'm sure I see. Yeah, Cool. Councillor Wilson.
Sorry, I'm interested. Was that the Court of Appeal was that the Environment Court or that court case?
My understanding was it was the High Court.
High Court.
Which deals with such matters,
In Canterbury.
In Canterbury.
Yeah. No, thank you.
Yeah. I think Richard, you've been made aware of that by Phil Page, I believe. Yep. So Richard has the details of that finding.
Interested in reading it. Yeah.
Cool. So I've got 5 hands in the air. I've got Michael, Alexa, Kim and Tim. So in that order, Michael, councillor Laws.
Thank you for your presentation. Oh. I assume I don't have to say that again, but
Positive.
That's right, we're here, Jack.
yeah, I thought so. That's cool. Listen, I'm curious. So you're here today because in March, your interaction with the Otago Regional Council led you to these concerns.
Excuse me.
In that discussion that you had in March, was there, I'm assuming it was with council officers, obviously wasn't with any of the governors. Was there any scientific evidence placed before you from the ORC staff as to why, in your opinion, is that this is the new regulations or the new plan will be more stringent than the national policy statement?
So, so we're working off the current published version of the proposed plan. And in March, there was no science presented. However, we have formally requested that of the council, and we have had, I'd say, what we consider to be a partial reply. So we have had some science come back to us, but there's also been a rider on that this may not be all that we're considering. So yeah, we're obviously looking to discover as much science that the OSC is relying on as possible, and to also input a lot of forestry science which we have at our disposal to make sure we get a good decision.
So I'm just, in the interest of transparency, what I'm trying to work out is if you have received the same science that the Otago Regional Council have in coming to their draft plan on this issue.
We're not sure. We've received something that we understand was incomplete, haven't we?
Yeah. So well, look, I can only rely on the fact that when Richard and Fleur were written to request that the same set of data come back to us that the council relied on. That's
We don't know what the
we're
council
not
had.
privy to what
Yeah.
you've seen in your own council meetings. So
I don't think we are. And the second issue is, I assume that therefore, when you mentioned the Glenhugh study and the sediment issue, those were two of the pieces of scientific evidence that were shared with you, or were they separate from?
the Glendhu study's been it's been an Otago Regional Council kind of joint forestry thing that's been going for some decades now. Yeah, so it's a very local piece of evidence.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
As councillors, have you received a package of information to read or
Not that I'm aware of.
just to give us an idea?
Yeah, we've got links, yeah. We haven't seen it. I don't think there's been any updates recently, but we've got links.
Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Forbes.
Thank you. Can someone turn the mic off? Still won't up there. Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. I've, as a chair of a Wild and Pine Committee, I have some questions around why you would think the NES is fine as it is when we consider the biodiversity risk of non-managed trees. They're a huge problem in our area. And given that the Parliamentary Commissioner for the Environment tells us that we need long-term funding and to control those things that currently is paid for by ratepayers and communities. And I wonder how the industry might plan to contribute to this. Also have questions around fire risk and control and the consequent loss of carbon sinking. And some of this you might want to think about if you can, when you come back to us. And it's interesting to see that there is no problem with slash. I just witnessed the reconstruction of a badly harmed cemetery in Queenstown, which caused a lot of pain for the community up there and a lot of expense. So I'll
that
give you that.
is not commercial forestry
And it's
station.
not about, I know, but it's wilding. And you don't contribute at the moment to wilding that is not on your own land.
That's
in my
that's actually incorrect. So
And
wilding
yes.
pines are principally come from high country farm shelter belts and old Forest Service plantings. They were planted by the government and high country farmers. Douglas fir and contorta are your two biggest species. So those species have been, well, Douglas fir is the second most planted species in commercial forestry in New Zealand. However, so the NES requires, before planting any block, and that includes a benign piece of radiata in the middle of Flagstaff Forest, and which has been there, which is over 100 years old, to do a wilding pine assessment and to pass certain criteria before you plant that. So the mechanism is in place that is scientifically robust to stop the problem reoccurring. But what you're referring to is dealing with the residual issue from those old Forest Service plantings, high country plantings. There are, of course, some wilding pines escaping from commercial forests. I can tell you that we do wilding pine work outside our boundaries. The extent that is done up in the Mackenzie and up around the Queenstown Lakes, which is obviously there's significant infestation up there. I mean, that is just a massive job. But the industry, to the point that it is responsible for it, because you've got to remember that, you know, if the Forest Service planted the dome, for example, back in whenever it was planted, those decisions are not necessarily the liability of whoever bought that forest, which is right there now, as long as they're not adding to it.
That's where the debate will be.
Yeah, well, the industry is going to is already contributing, but I think it's really important to note that, you know, most of these high country areas are not commercial forestry areas, and you're actually talking about high country station shelter belts at Dover's Ferry and Pictorvin, and that's exactly what's happened in the Mackenzie country where the fires have been, and that's currently getting chewed up for bioenergy by pioneer generation and taken down to boilers down to the road. When it's not a fire. I might add.
Thank you. Councillor Malcolm.
So on the water yield study that sign report that you're still waiting to get back, so you based your comments predominantly on a comparison with native forest catchments. Have you also done the work on the difference between when it comes to extensive grazing and water short catchments, so of grazing land as opposed to
So the actual equation is pretty simple, right? So both native forests and pine forests generally run a slightly acidic soil type in an uncompacted soil. And when rainfall comes down, the canopy intercepts the rainfall impact. Raindrop hits the ground, creates a puff of sediment, off it goes into the river. So it intercepts that, but most importantly, what the study is showing is that the trees and the root systems act as a conduit for water to flow down, and you can see it happening in the forest into the groundwater, where it's stored and released potentially much further downstream. Now, if you look at farming catchments, so it's our two biggest industries, sheep and beef farming and dairy. So the soil types are typically compacted and they're typically alkaline because the farmers put lime all over them to support an alkaline soil environment to grow ryegrass and clover, which is the feedstock for our two most common sheep and beef, two most common animals. Now you end up with obviously a very light grass cover over those paddocks, and what happens is there's no great transmission of the water into the groundwater, and it tends to flash off. So you'll see in a native forest catchment, likewise a pine forest catchment, you'll see a relatively steady flow of water because the groundwater is releasing in low flow times and the impact of storms is certainly mitigated. And I know that one of the minor findings from this study was that in Auckland, where there was a cyclonic flood, one of the PED catchments was up there. And I think that the Pine Tree catchment intercepted something like 60% of that Auckland storm flow compared to the PED catchment next door. So that's the benefits that you can actually get out of having forestry compared to pasture, because pasture is just going to flash off and then it's going to dry out. And you can see that. Many of you I know are environmentalist trampers, you're out in the outdoors a lot, and you know that if you're walking around field and you get even water flows, and that is vastly different to a catchment. So if you've got a water short catchment, what I propose is that you will get, of course the trees drink some water, well, I'm not saying that they don't, but they don't drink as much as you think. And ultimately, what are you preserving those water flows for? You're preserving them to support over-allocated catchments for irrigation, which you know full well contributes to phosphorus, nitrogen, E. coli, and all sorts of other stuff going into the lower catchments. And to me, that's a very interesting position for the ORC to be in. And we just can't get our head around it.
So sorry, just to to answer that, just to clarify, so in the Scion report, that scientific comparison will be there?
Look, I'm
Yeah,
not, I'm not an
yeah,
expert on it,
that's fine.
so the actual study involves an installation of a whole lot of scientific gear. Now, it was supposed to be a 3-year study. It got cut short by COVID. So Forest Industries funding it because it ran out of its funding window. Forest Industries funding it to go for another year. Dr. Dean Mason from Scion is the lead scientist. He has had some discussions with her and her team about that. And we're actively funding some conclusions from that study. So, but it will be a published scientific paper, but it isn't at this stage. But it is leading science on water hydrology in catchments, and it will answer a lot of the questions that you need in a much more detailed way than a BWare catchment study does.
Time frame?
It'll be later this year, if not next year. I think you're going to have to rely on preliminary findings, not a peer review.
Thank you.
Would it be useful if someone like Dean, if Dean came along to another session that you have to give an interim report on where they're at? Would that be a useful thing in your decision making?
Yeah. That's something that maybe you could communicate with the CE about. But at this point here, we're just asking, some clarifications on the talk before. I've actually been very generous this time, possibly too generous. Look, we've got Tim, Lloyd, and Andrew. If we could just
Sorry if we're talking too much.
no, not at all.
I'll
This
withdraw
has
that.
been beneficial.
I'll withdraw my question.
Okay, so I've got two. I've got Lloyd.
Thank you, Brian. I've just got a couple of comments, but basically we represent ratepayers. I've had a lot of contact with a lot of ratepayers around forestry in recent times. And the main contact is around their concerns around watling pine and the watling pine assessment and that assessment being self-regulated. A lot of concern around weed and pest intrusions that comes along with forestry, in particular deer, pigs and possums and rabbits, and the ability to control that biosecurity risk with forestry. Also, a lot of discussions around
The biosecurity risk, sorry?
Is there a clarification coming out of this?
Sorry.
Is there a
I'm getting to the end of the year. Yeah.
question? Is there a question?
Well, my question is, there's a whole lot of other stuff that are non-scientific stuff, which is social and economic, like social ramifications of forestry. The visual, people see the visual disregard for biodiversity in their plantings and some of the spraying activities. It's not just a complete bed of roses. And so my question is, do you see that there's some science stuff there, which there's always two sides to science reports, but also do you recognise it's social and
Yep. So what you're talking about is perception, not reality. Okay. MPI did a study in 2019. At the time, forestry was producing approximately twice the rate of return that sheep and beef farming was. So it's highest and best land use. It also employs per hectare approximately twice the number of full-time equivalent workers than farming does. So that social stuff is just purely wrong. It's just people don't live on the land, they live in town and work out there. That's MPI commissioned that study from PricewaterhouseCoopers. It's been available for 5 years. Okay, with regards to pests, I can take you to numerous farms where deer are unmanaged, and I also chair the New Zealand Game Animal Council, where, deer are a valued introduced species. They need to be managed not only for the benefits, but also their threats. And, there are problems across farmland where they're unmanaged. There are problems across pine forests where they're unmanaged. It is not a forestry problem. It is a land management problem on a whole variety of land uses.
Thank you. Councillor Moon.
Yeah, clearly your submission is based on the lack of scientific evidence and the lack of problem identification, which those two sit together. So my question probably is more for Richard, is that the report that the Southern Wood Council...
I can't answer questions in public forum, sorry.
Okay, so it's a question for the chair.
No, it's not a question, it's a clarification. If you've got any clarifications from the two speakers.
Okay.
It's not for me to reply.
So the question is, would it be useful for the council to clarify that the scientific evidence that was referred to in your clause 3 consultation with staff is understanding a timeframe when it's completed and understanding whether we've cited it or not. And also the other question around your section 32 comments. Have you experienced before dealing with TAs in Otago, or potentially Southland for the sound of when you cover Southland as well? So have you worked through a section 32 analysis with any district or city councils in the past?
I understand that that's happened to a degree, but what you've got now, I believe, is somewhat of a change of pace, which is why we're here, because there's this Canterbury court case, and ultimately, because the proposed plan change it has such a dramatic cost impact to us, the bar has been considerably raised in our view, and that's been supported by the High Court findings in Canterbury. So yes, there's been cost benefit analysis, but we understand that the bar for that has now gone up considerably, and there's an offer here to work with the council on that, because we all want good environmental rules, right? Foresters are environmentalists as well. That's why most of us got into it in the first place. But it's about getting good outcomes, and what we see in the current draft plan is unfortunately going to lead to potentially some perverse outcomes.
Thank you. Big thank you for the two of you coming along here today. We hope to see you again if that's appropriate.
Really appreciate the time slot, folks. And
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
thank you. Do I push that?
Thank you.
Okay, moving on through, we have an agenda. Confirmation of that agenda. I'm happy to move the agenda as tabled. I have a seconder, Councillor Wilson. I'll put that. Those for, aye, against, carried. Right, moving on. Declaration of interest. Members are reminded of the need to stand aside from decision making when a conflict arises. Presentation, confirmation of minutes. I'm happy to move the minutes. There's two sets of minutes, I think 8th of May and the 23rd of May. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Wilson, thank you. I put that motion, the acceptance of those minutes. Those for, aye, against, carried. Open actions. I don't think there are any open actions, which is a bit of a surprise. Matters for consideration. We're going to move straight into our first report. Biodiversity Partnerships and Initiatives update. Invite staff to the front desk. Okay. He's recalled. Yeah. Okay. Yes. Let's talk about this first report, Biodiversity Partnerships and Initiatives, an update. The activity was written by Anna, who's here on Zoom. Welcome. We've got Libby, welcome. Elodie, welcome. And was endorsed by Joanna, welcome. Just some key points from me before I pass over to staff. That the purpose was to provide a report on the environmental initiatives support of biodiversity partnerships and projects as per the annual plan 23-24 level of service performance measures. Key points that come out of that is that the report shows that a wide range of environmental initiatives have been supported and the key deliverables are achieving on-ground environmental improvements. The performance measure relating to environmental initiatives relates primarily to the Eco Fund and associated incentive programs. Not all reports have been received to date. That's for the Eco Fund because most projects are due to report in August 24, where report data has been provided that has been used in the summary of outputs. in relation to partnership engagement. Partnership engagement activities and projects include partnerships where the goal is to enhance Indigenous biodiversity. This year, activities have increased to 12 engagement activities, with several of those including more than one event. New activities include exploring threatened species work, blue-green networks, QLDC, being part of the new Upper Lakes Conservation Sector Group, the WAO-led Biodiversity Collaborative Funding Roundtable, and the Sustainable Seas National Science Challenge using this research. So I now invite staff. Is there any comments or intro you would like to make?
Thank you, Councillor Scott. So this report, as Councillor Scott has said, is provided to the committee as there's a level of service measure which requires us to provide it. You'll see in the report that there have been new partnerships formed and they will continue to be developed in the biodiversity space into the future as well. So the 2023 and 2024 Eco Fund and incentive funding projects are also included in this report. And some reporting isn't yet received on the 2023 Eco Fund, and therefore we don't have the comprehensive report with all of the detail. And this is because each project is at a different stage in their implementation. So we are having a new system set up to enable accessible reporting, which will assist us with better reporting in the future. There are many initiatives we provide support and funding to outside of the scope of this paper, and we will be bringing back a separate paper around that other funding as part of the review of the environmental funding, which is available in year 2. So there will be another paper that follows up on that. The level of services and performance measures that we're delivering on are from the 2021 to 2031 long-term plan, and they include to complete a report on the initiatives and organisations supported and the key deliverables, and we're to report to council by 30 June. So we've actually missed that deadline because we're now in August. And the second one is joint projects developed and progressed and reported to council. So that's the basis of this report.
Cool, thank you. Can I invite councillors maybe to focus on the environmental initiatives first, and then we'll go secondly to the partnership engagement activities. Libby, before I invite it to councillors, you referred to accessible reporting. Maybe just a clarification of what that actually means.
So what we're looking to do with the new system is to have kind of like real-time tracking and updated reporting that we can get from funding recipients, so that we can then provide an accurate update that's easy for everyone. So it's easy for staff to report on and easy for groups to input their information.
Yeah, so with having the new system, the focus has been on making it easy externally as well. Yeah.
Oh, cool. Sounds great. Okay, environmental initiatives, open it up to councillors. Lloyd.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just a quick question. Just table 1, which is like the measure of your environmental stuff. Just for clarification, is that table derived from Eco Fund outputs?
Yeah. This is reporting on the Eco Fund and the environmental incentives. So
we've got incentive funding which sits alongside Eco Fund, and that's all assessed at the same time. Is that what your question is about?
Yes. So my question basically is it a combination of those two, or is it just one or the other? I guess
it's a combination.
Okay. So the incentive funding is the stuff around like fencing, QE2, and that sort of.
Yes, and funding for water quality improvements. So there's some targeted funding we do around funding for rabbit management, and then water quality and QE2. What's the other one?
Large scale.
Large scale biodiversity as well.
Yeah, so those other ones that we get as well. Yeah, no, that makes a lot more sense. Thank you.
Thank you. Alan, followed by Kate.
Thank you. Look, we've already noted a couple of times that there is information yet to come in, particularly on the 2023 Eco Fund, and many of those reports coming in August. When that information is received, will we receive another report
further information that can include those that not yet received information?
We can do that, so we can either do that as part of our update for next year, because I believe we have the same performance measure we need to deliver on for June next year as well. Anna, do you have any comment on that?
The reporting is always going to be a snapshot in time. So with the suite of projects from even going back to 2018, which are very difficult to report on, if we include 2022, 2023, 2024, many of those projects are still live. Some of them were 3-year projects. So at any point in time, we'll be able to give you a snapshot of what has been achieved based on reports that have come in over that period. Whilst the reporting is generally due in August, or the projects might finish in July, they have a month to report. There are always, not always, but there are quite often variations, and that's extending some projects out as well due to matters outside those applicants' control. So the idea is that when we have our reporting system set up, we can have a dashboard reporting, and that we can provide real time the outputs that have been achieved. What we have tried to also include here is what we do know about the outputs that are planned. So we're giving you an indication of the full quantum of outputs against consistent metrics, with a mixture of those that have been reported upon and those that are yet to come, but we understand based on what they planned in their application. And that's the best we can do at this point, given that projects are spread out over that period of time, and the reporting will always be at different parts of that. So unfortunately, it really is how the system is set up and how the projects run as to how we get a final output. Will always be ones that are coming that are planned.
Thanks.
I was just going to ask a question. Is there a better, would you rather that there's just a report once we have all the information? Is that an easier way?
That would seem to make sense to me to do it that way.
That may
I
just
understand
mean
there was that service level that we were able for. When would that roughly be? Or is that a guess?
It would be a guess, because again, some will be given extensions, and so we want to make it as easy as possible for the community to achieve the outcomes and report back to us. So sometimes they need an extension, or they haven't spent all their funding and then they want to allocate that later in the future. So
certainly seems a pity to have to wait for the last project in before council and governance actually knows how it's actually gone, isn't it?
Well, so
I'm
that's
contradicting what Alan has said. Anyway, there's something to be thought.
Yeah, right. Yes, thank you. And look, I had a further question, a broader one, and I guess this: where's the thought in moving around these sorts of projects from output reporting to outcome reporting? Is that a possibility, or is this just getting too difficult at this level?
I'll let Anna comment on that, because that probably relates to a catchment action plan work as well.
Yeah, that's correct. What we aim to do is in any, primarily through catchment action plans, so at that sub-regional scale, have outcomes or goals that are being targeted for key areas, whether biodiversity, pest control, water quality, and then the activities that occur within that catchment action plan scope will then be contributing to that outcome. So there's a logic behind each of these plans, which says if we do this activity, we expect it to contribute to one or more of a number of outcomes. And so that assumption is tested and built into the logic that sits behind the action plans. The idea is that EcoFund and associated incentives and all sorts of other activities, we will capture that through an online spatial hub, and then those outputs will be measured, and we'll evaluate the outcome that we're aiming for, which is a much longer period of time, and to see that if the cause and effect that we're looking for is happening. So are we making a difference with the activities we're either funding or undertaking ourselves, or that other community are doing on their own back? So the longer term project that we've been working towards since we started the Integrated Catchment Management Program.
No, thanks. Thank you, Anna, for that answer. That makes good sense, and I understand that. Thanks.
Cool, thank you. Okay, so I've got Kate, Gary, and Lloyd. Kate?
Oh, look, it's sort of been, it's about the outcomes and how we look at those and see them. And I was wondering about photos. So the online way that people share the data, will they'll be able to upload photos of what they've done if it's something that applies or not?
Can you answer that, Anna? Does it take photos?
Yes, the system that we've got, and you can see the Catlins one and the Upper Lakes one in the very early days. They will be able to attach photos, or we can attach photos to various points on a map. We haven't even got that far yet, but I believe the system can have that. The other thing we do ask is when we do get reports in, quite often applicants will send us photos as well, so we can upload those.
But it's the before and after, which can be compelling. I mean, this is about accountability for other people's money going to other people, and we need to make sure that we're telling a good story within Justified and sharing those stories. So thank you.
So I should just add to that, the applications do require monitoring to be advised as to how they intend to monitor their project and their outcomes achieved, and they indicate it might be through bird counts, it might be through photo points, tree survival rates, etc. So
cool.
There's been quite a bit of discussion about outcome versus output in a variety of different papers and things, you know, going back pre-LTP. It is still important that we measure outputs, and that's for your point, Kate. We are providing grants for particular activities, and we need to ensure that that money is being spent appropriately and as it is being given it. Where we do need to improve is then the subsequent outcome monitoring of the broad suite of activities that's happening, whether it be OSU driven or TLA, or through these projects that have receiving grants. So there's a number of things, and that outcome piece is something that I think, you know, we've had direction from the table to have a closer think about. But the outputs will remain important just for rigor purposes.
Thank you, Richard. Okay, thanks, Kate. Gary.
Thank you. I'm curious about real-time reporting and just how onerous is this going to end up being on our recipients of this money? Because by and large, we're talking relatively small sums of money. We're talking community groups. I would imagine the comprehensive reports that they provide at a sort of staged position through their funding term is, wouldn't that be of more detail and benefit than being able to log in on a Sunday morning and see what they've done since Friday, if that's the extent we're looking to go to? I'm just worried that this could end up too onerous on what are well-meaning, hard-working community groups.
A good question, Councillor Kelleher. So the intention is not to put more burden, it's to actually lighten the load for the community groups. What I envisage is that we would have staff who are in the field being able to input data, so that when they go and visit with a group and talk to them, they can then report back on where that group is at. And so our ORC staff would be able to input real-time data. The stuff for the community groups to provide would just kind of be similar to what they already do in their comprehensive reports, and we would then upload those, and we would just have them or they can upload them, it depends on how we set it up. But we would have it so that that information is all readily available. At the moment, we don't have a good way of collating that, so that's why we're presenting this report, and pretty much Elodie has to pull that together. So having a system to be able to help do that for us is the intention of the real-time tracking of that.
Okay, great. So we shouldn't be burdening them anymore with
absolutely not
paperwork.
We will hopefully be reducing that.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Lloyd.
Well, you know, thanks for that. It's pretty much been covered. I think what I was going to say was it may be an idea to have interim. Like, it's more about whether they're on track or not on track at this stage, as opposed to that's what we need to know. And we've got our outputs. But I think also, I thought it was really what you were just said just then, Libby, that to have people, our staff, talking to these people on the ground is like, that's a massive communication bridge building, getting us out there in a positive sense, is which we really need to be, so we can turn a negative into a positive. The negative being council wants all this reporting, to the positive being we're to come and see you and it'll help you with your reporting. That makes sense. And also the other thing I was going to mention, you did mention in your lead-in around the leading up into
Yeah,
the
sorry.
environment. Pardon?
There's a question there, Lloyd, isn't
Oh, that was a statement before, but that's fine. There'll be a question in this before. Leading into the establishment of criteria around the environment fund, that you foresee that most of the criteria around all of this environmental financing stuff will be pulled into line to with the reporting lines and that sort of stuff that may be more standardised across the ORC as a whole group.
Yeah, that's the intention. We've got a bit of work to do to figure out exactly how that will pull together. So once we've done that, we'll bring that back and provide options and recommendations around how we see that working for all funding. But for the environmental implementation team, I think it would be best that we do have standardised kind of criteria so that it's easy to monitor. We understand what the outputs and the outcomes are, and that's consistent.
Yeah, good, thank you.
Cool. I'm going to move on to partnerships. There's really discussion around partnerships. Just trying to find it. So there's Libby or Joe, there's been something like, I'm just trying to find the page. What page actually is it?
Page 14.
14.
Okay, any discussion or outline there, Joe or Libby, in terms of biodiversity partnerships? Yes, page 14, thank you. Just in terms of Act 12 engagement activities, how we landed up with those particular ones?
Yeah, I can pass that to Anna to answer, but I think the key overview of that is that we've moved up and we're doing more of that engagement work, and there's obviously more to do, so we will keep working on that and building those relationships across the region so that we can see really good biodiversity outcomes and some joint projects that we do together with those organisations to achieve outcomes for our region in the biodiversity space. But Anna, do you want to talk about like a quick overview of how those 12 come about?
Yes, and this is in the engagement activities. It was it's quite a broad term, so yeah, it's a matter of where do you draw the line, I guess. And so we focused on those engagement activities that were around our staff and primarily our biodiversity partnership lead in working with our partners. And our partners in this case are the key first stakeholders, I guess, are at our Otago Biodiversity Forum, which is an ongoing activity, obviously, our TAs, and then other key partners at a regional scale. So that's where that's kind of the framework behind why we pick those activities rather than every time we turn up at something. It is not an ideal way of reporting it because it's a matter of coming to the end of the year and looking back at what we did. Some of them are proactive and in there for a reason, and other ones are opportunistic, I would say, and have resulted in some really good work going forward. So yeah, there's not a method behind that except taking the level of service agreement wording and looking at how our work best fits within that and what activities really fit that partnership engagement.
Thank you, Anna. Any questions? Andrew?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Sorry. Paragraph 15, it talks about a biodiversity management tool, and I noted somewhere, I can't remember where, that it looked like Wildlands Consultancy was providing advice on that. My question really is around, it says that it's to help inform decision making on how to best manage land for biodiversity outcomes. Having had first-hand experience with QE2, I just wanted to pass on their ability to recognise where you've got, I'm relating to a working farm scenario where it's got high, it's been identified some high biodiversity values and in some way protecting them. QE2 bent over backwards to recognise the farming operation as a a day-to-day business, and the importance of being able to incorporate your farm management into your biodiversity protection and enhancement. They made it extremely easy, and I just wanted to share that because it's a wee bit along the lines of what Gary's asked. We've got to make sure when we're in the space that we can work as well as possible, as practicable, whatever, as we can with the recipient, whether they're a group or whether they're an individual, because collectively together we can if we recognise the importance of a land owner still needing a requirement to operate a farm in a practical sense, but realising that the protection of that biodiversity is absolutely critical as well. But yeah, I just wanted to share that. You may want to comment or you may not.
I can comment on that. So if the development of that is just a tool. It's not something that we would go, it's just one part of a decision-making process. So we wouldn't go and say this biodiversity area has to be protected because, and it might be wrong, that it's just a tool. So, and we absolutely agree with, and we do support QE2 to ensure that we get good outcomes from a biodiversity and a farming point of view as well. So we will take your comment on board, but it's already in the back of our minds.
Wonderful. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I struggled to see a question on that, but well done, Andrew. Lloyd?
Thanks for the comment.
Question.
Yeah, is there a question or is this a statement?
Oh, perhaps I have a question first and then I can do my statement following.
When you move
And
You could, okay.
Oh, no, page 23.
Would you like to move the noting of the overall report? I understand that.
Well, I've got a couple of questions. That's all right with you.
Okay.
But the questions are, if you go to the attachment to biodiversity partnerships, et cetera, I'm trying to and there's two parts of that. There's the partnership, then the project partnership. So would it be correct to say that the first part is pretty much business as usual? I'm trying to work out where the funding for these things come from predominantly. So you got funding to do your create your partnerships, which is like, with your district councils, regional councils, and then, but down the bottom, we've got funding for like actual project funding stuff. So I'm trying to work out how that differentiates in our back office area.
So I'll have a go and then Anna can jump in if I miss anything. So the table 1 is work that we do with our staff. So those are things that we are not funding. That's right, isn't it, Anna? At the moment.
That's correct. More about engagement, collaboration activities.
And then the table 2 for the project partnerships are things that we have provided funding for. So either through ORC money or through Jobs for Nature funding that we've received.
So you understand that, so thanks. So the partnership funding, do we have shouldn't we have a set budget for that on an annual basis?
Yes, so that's all being presented through the long-term plan, and there were itemised sections within tables that we've shown around how much is going to each of those projects. And yes, we do have set budget.
Yeah, I love so it's all good. There's a bit of stuff that concerns me. I make no doubt about that, but I understand that it's then what you're working on the day-to-day stuff. We just get to read it once every 4 months or whatever. The around doubling up and stuff. So the stuff we saw like funding with co-funding with other people, and then we're putting stuff in like particularly like the Tairi Ngāawa one. We're talking in here about there's a project in there which we're involved with, which is all good. But then we're talking about doing catchment action plans or putting a person in to do catchment action plans on top of, is that related to the integrated catchment management,
yes.
Catchment action plans, et cetera, et cetera?
Yes.
Because I understand we're due to go there soon, whereas we seem to be going there on under a different terms of reference here.
Yeah, so That is right. So under the Ngā Awa project, we are co-funding a role that will sit at Ōkaha. So we're co-funding a role with DOC to support the Ngā Awa project, but it will also support our integrated catchment management work when we get in there as well.
Oh, so that's to support it into the future as opposed to the now.
It's supporting it from this financial year for 3 years.
Have I got another question? The other one, I just wanted a bit of clarification of the next one on the list because I was quite intrigued, which is the Osprey one. So we're obviously doing some work around what it looks like following Osprey
Yes.
being taken away from the, yeah. So I was just wondering if you could give us a bit of detail as to what this partnership or project is.
Yes, so there is, we have provided funding and have an agreement with Predator Free Dunedin to help us understand what a transition approach from when Osprey leaves an area and what that could look like for the community and what the options are around how to ensure that those possum numbers are retained at the level that Osprey have got them to. So we're still waiting on the outcomes of that report. So but that's with Predator Free to deliver for us.
Well, that's good. It'll be really good to have one because that is a significant concern in the rural sector.
Yep.
The risk, the TB risk that comes with
So
the proliferation of possums everywhere.
So we're doing that work with Predator Free so they can give us the advice around what the best approach would look like and how to transition out.
Yeah.
And how we support our communities to ensure that those numbers are kept low.
Yeah. No, well, I'm pleased that we're doing something. I probably think it would be good to be on a larger scale. We can, like, to be fair, Predator Free Dunedin, they're up and running, they're doing all sorts of stuff, but it's really, it's not West Otago, put it that way.
No, so the intention of that project is that it would inform how we do that in a rural setting. So they're doing work in the West Harbour Mount Cargill area as kind of a pilot, and then we would look to see how we roll that out in other farming communities. And maybe they're different in different ones, but we'll take that learning from that. But this is just the pilot project.
Are we lobbying the government around this at the same time?
Not currently.
Yeah, I was just thinking back to the last update we had at Seas, I'm not aware of the active lobbying on in terms of investment from Osprey.
But is it fair to say that we're getting a report on transitioning out? No doubt that potentially could be, when that report comes to this table, it could be the catalyst for reviewing where to from here.
Absolutely.
Yeah, cool. Thank you. Okay, so we've had a round of questions. We've got a recommendation to note this report. Do I have a mover to note the report? Councillor Wilson, Councillor Somerville. Is there any discussion around the recommendation? If not, I'll put the motion to note the report. Those for? Aye. Again. Carried. Thank you. So, thank you. Let's get to the next report. Right, the second report is the Biosecurity Operational Plan Annual Report. Authors are Murray Libby, welcome Murray, endorsed by Jay. The purpose of the report was to report on the implementation of Biosecurity Operational Plan 23-24 for the period 1st of July to 30th of June 24 as required under the Biosecurity Act. The key points for me were that the 23-24 Biosecurity Operational Plan contains 63 performance indicators. Overall, 47 were fully achieved or exceeded. Further 10 were assessed as being partially achieved. 2 KPIs were not achieved, while 4 KPIs were not measurable as required event did not occur. While the KPIs across the past 4 reporting periods are not identical, there has been a progressive improvement in achievement from 29% to 74%. And just a final brief comment in relation to rabbits from me. So simply to note that there were 24 notices of direction, which I understand, Murray, 23 in relation to rabbits, were issued during the year to elderly and non-compliant properties that meet the required MOD criteria. These properties will be re-inspected during the 24-25 year to determine progress towards compliance. Okay, staff, any comment in relation to this report before I open it up to councillors?
Yeah, just before I pass to Libby, I just wanted to say that this report reflects a lot of great work by the team and our community in terms of this work program, and just wanted to recognise it and say thank you to the team over this past year and the community as well.
Great, thanks, Josh. Well said. Councillor Laws, did I see another hand as well? No, Councillor Laws. Rabbits.
This report tells me in part what the ORC has done, but it doesn't tell me how effective you've been. When am I going to get an effectiveness report when it comes to pest management?
Very good question. So just yesterday, Murray and I have been assessing requests for proposals from consultants across our country to undertake an effectiveness review of our regional pest management plan and how we're meeting the objectives. So we have assessed all of those proposals, and we'll be making a decision within the next week to engage a consultant to undertake that work. And we are due to have a draft report provided by March.
Okay. As you'll be aware, or you might not be, I don't know how long you've been here, but ever since I've been on this council, I've continually raised the issue of how do you know what you're doing with the money you've got? And I'm glad that we finally get to that point. But I guess the next question I'd ask is, if I look at sustained control pest programs, it's on my page 38, feral rabbits. And it says ensure continuing control, this is the objective. Ensure continuing control of feral rabbits to manage their spread and reduce adverse effects and impacts on economic well-being and the environment. There's a series of ticks and crosses and things that are there next to gets that. I don't know how many rabbits there are still. And really, this is my third term on this council. Does that mean that when you do your effectiveness review, you're actually going to count the rabbits, or at least have some indication that that there is a control of feral rabbits in the Otago region? Because at the moment, I don't know, and I guess the ORC doesn't know either, do they?
Well, we are doing night counts and inspections. What's the answer, Murray? Libby?
So the effectiveness review will look at how we're tracking to deliver on the objective, which is ensure continuing control of feral rabbits to manage their spread and to reduce adverse effects and impacts on economic well-being in the environment. So that's what the effectiveness review will tell us, is how is ORC delivering on that objective. And they will do, as part of their effectiveness review, they'll do a range of interviews with stakeholders and staff to understand that, you know, from their perspective, how we're measuring that too. But Councillor Scott is correct that we're doing quite a lot of work in that space to understand how rabbit numbers are trending across the region. And so we've increased the number of rabbit night counts that we do. How many is it now?
We've got 31.
So we're doing 31 of those across the region. And we've completed them all for this so it's not reflected in this report, but we've just completed all of them for this financial year. So we'll have some data soon about whether what that's telling us.
So they'll come to the next quarterly meeting, will it?
That will come to the next. It'll come to the next report on the operational plan for next year. So this time next year.
Can I just ask Richard on this, because I asked this question last quarter. Sorry, it's completely related to this.
Yeah, no, that's fine. But can I just ask for a clarification on your previous points? So do we know the number of rabbits or not? Sorry, Michael.
No, we don't.
Sorry?
We don't know the number of rabbits in Otago.
Well, I would have thought if we're doing night counts and extrapolate it, you would. That's what do we need night counts? What?
We can't technically know the number of rabbits because that's a bit of an impossibility. We can approximate the number of rabbits that we've got within the Otago region.
Yeah.
And based on the last report of Ninth Council for last year's data, we have what we could say is a variable rate across the region, that there are hotspot areas and then there are low spot areas. And that will, based on the data that I've gotten for this year's night counts, that is a similar example that is happening as well.
For the last 7 years.
And so we'll get trend analysis from that data again for this year. That was follow on from what we did last year. But to answer the question about counting the number of rabbits, that's a impossibility. That's a bit like counting the number of blades of grass.
No, let's get real. I mean, estimates based on, information, based on regional analysis.
So the question was, do we know the number of rabbits? And the answer is no, it is not possible to know the number of rabbits. What we can do is we can do some very wild approximations based on the night counts and give some numbers that would probably have very little meaning behind them. Or we can use those accounts to identify the areas of the region where we think we should be focusing resources, which is what we currently do. I was just going to a subsequent answer, and then I know you've got another question for me, Michael, but the conversation that we just had off the back of Michael's question is not dissimilar to the conversation we've had multiple times, and even in the previous paper around outcomes versus outputs. We have to do this plan, which it's a legislative responsibility to say, here are the actions we are going to undertake. What it doesn't do is actually say, well, what is it? So what? The so what bit's missing. And we've talked a lot. And I will, I need to go away with ELT and with our management group, and we really need to think hard about how we can start bringing a bit more of the so what back to the table. Because that's the outcome piece that we have in some spaces, but not in others. We do a lot of this sort of reporting at the moment. We say we'll do this, did we do it, yes or no? It's that next step. So it was, that conversation there was effectively the same conversation we've been having across a number of our work areas.
Michael, apologies.
No. Actually, Richard was getting there. Thank you, Richard, because it's the effectiveness at the end of the day. What are we spending money actually on? We do this, but is it actually working? We don't know, and that's the effectiveness review. Yeah. I just want to clarify this, and this is for newer councillors as well. What you've just said is, we do this because we're required legally to do so. Here's our pest management plan. These are our inputs and outputs and stuff like that. But there is no legislative requirement, as I understand what you're saying, to make sure that it's working. Is that right?
The legislative requirement is that we provide this report to the Minister of Biosecurity, and each year when we create an operational plan, we also provide that. But you're right, there is no legislative requirement that we need to ensure we are meeting the objectives, or that we measure that we're meeting the objectives. So we've taken your feedback and the initiative to undertake an effectiveness review, which I don't think has ever been done in Otago based on other pest plans. There have been some other councils that are doing that work as well, which will help inform our next RPMP too, to ensure that it is fit for purpose and we've got the right objectives in there.
The short answer is no.
Yeah, no. But what we're saying is, we know that's wrong. We know that's crazy, right? Am I interpreting you correctly? And you're saying we're going to do something about that because it is crazy.
I think that my position on it is, it is still important we do the output piece, because we need to commit to a program, and that's the rigor around completing the program for the money that's set aside for it. We are definitely light in the is it working space, and that's the gap we need to fill. And we need to make sure that we've got adequate resource to do that, so that we don't end up spending all our time doing the evaluation and we don't meet any of these outputs, because there's a balancing act. But my view, having listened to the commentary around the table and got to understand the work programs, is in a number of areas, that outcome piece is somewhere we should be putting a little bit more effort. So we know that the money we are spending, or the time we're spending, or the money the community is spending is getting the outcomes that we're aiming for.
Cool. We're done there, Michael?
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you.
Cool, thank you. Gary?
Thank you. Quick question around the TLAs and other external landowners, which I think I probably raise quite regularly. But as these reports flow through, are we seeing a heightened sort of responsibility being met by those landowners, as in councils and all of their lands across Otago, not just the municipal areas, but the sort of everything else? Have they really ramped up their rabbit control that they are doing that on a very regular basis, or is it still just as a response to a complaint from a neighbour?
Yeah, good question. So we've put a lot of, and it's in this paper, we've put a lot of effort into ensuring that we're engaging with external so Crown organisations or TLAs to let them know what our focus and priorities are in the biosecurity space, so that they can budget for undertaking control work if they need to obtain more budget. So they are definitely a lot more engaged and supportive of undertaking not just rabbit control work, but pest, biosecurity work across the board. We will continue to work with them, and if we need to, we will undertake regulatory action if there is a slip and they aren't doing the work that they need to be doing. But yeah, we've got really good relationships with all of those organisations, and generally they're on board, and we're seeing good work undertaken. Sometimes they are reactive to a neighbour complaint or to us giving them a little bit of a push, but they are doing that work when they're required to.
So when we're having that really good engagement, are they saying, yes, we have X rabbit contractor and he's covering these areas on a monthly basis and doing an awesome job? I'd be very surprised if any neighbours complain. Is that the extent of what they're saying, or are they just saying, yes, we're cognizant of it and we're waiting for complaints, or we don't believe that there's any issue there?
There's probably a range. So most of them where they know that there are issues and they're addressing those issues themselves. They don't really need much from us, and they're across what their issues are, and they understand as well that those issues aren't just a one-off, and they need to continue to ensure that they're doing pest management long term, so it's not just a one-off rabbit control and then walk away. So they're understanding that. There's some cases where they haven't been across a specific problem and it's come up, and we've had to follow that up with them. And that will continue. But once they are aware of it, they're dealing with it.
Right, but we haven't really met a point yet where, like most rural landowners will have annually a budget for their pest control and be undertaking it. In those organisations, they're not quite at that point yet.
Correct.
Okay, righto, disappointing. Thanks for that.
Thank you, Gary. Andrew?
It sort of follows along similar lines, but I'm just talking generally public and private land. Are we maximising the use of the good neighbour rule in the regional pest management plan to be able to justify a notice of action, whatever, or control work, etc.? And once again, I'm not just narrowing it down to rabbits, but in biosecurity sense. Because I think the tools are there to be able to get some more training.
Yeah, so the good neighbour rule is slightly problematic for us, in that we need to receive a complaint from someone to act on, and they need to be undertaking control and have control work and management plans or an agreement with someone in place before we then take action on Crown land. Or so the good neighbour rule is complex, I guess, is my answer. But we are using everything we can to ensure that that work gets done. We do get better outcomes if we're engaging and talking to them rather than going straight to regulatory. So the education and advocacy part first, and generally that has been working, but we do have the regulatory tool up our sleeve if we need to use that.
Thank you.
Cool. Just before I go to Alan, I will point out that there are 63 key performance indicators. We always spend a lot of time talking about rabbits. Alan?
How many?
63.
I think it's rabbits.
Section 30 notes the value of better strategic planning and how good that's been. Section 31 says operating in targeted management areas and working with land occupiers in these areas through to compliance is more effective. I just wonder if you could explain a bit on that, expand on that, and give some examples of how you've been able to do that that's been useful.
So your question is, I'm just going to clarify that before I start talking and might not get it quite right. So you want some examples of where we've done targeted management areas?
Yes, and how that has been an improvement on past approaches.
Okay. Yeah, so in the past, we had a work program where we would, we kind of separated all of our pests out, and we'd go out to a property and we'd look for one pest. So we'd look at rabbits, or we'd look at old man's beard, or we'd look at ragwort specifically. But we've changed our approach to how we undertake our work. And we now go out and we look at a property as a whole and look for all of the types of pests that there could be, and they get assessed on all of those at once. We might go out for one reason, like we might know there is a historic rabbit problem, but we'd look for all of the different biosecurity issues that could come up on that property. So that's kind of how we're being a bit more strategic. And we are also now looking at, instead of doing a rabbit inspection on one on Otago Peninsula and then one in Waihola and then one in Cromwell, instead of doing it like that, we will look at an area that we undertake inspections in, so that when we are providing information to those landowners or occupiers, they get all of that information at the same time, and it gives them an opportunity to collaborate together and get a contractor in place that they can use at the same time, rather than the ad hoc kind of different times of year doing poisoning and shooting. And so that I guess the great outcomes we're getting is when people work together and they coordinate that approach, and they might get a rabbit fencing contractor in at the same time to do multiple properties, so that they also get reduced costs by doing that. So I don't think we actually have specific examples of management areas, because that's just the approach that we do everywhere we're doing work now. And we didn't used to do that.
Yeah. No, thank you. No, that explains that. That's very helpful. And look, I'd just like to note that assessment report, how helpful I found that with the explanations of the KPIs and that section on lessons learned, which I thought made very good sense, and it's very good to see.
Well, that's all Murray, so well done, Murray.
So just before we move to the recommendations, so the lessons learned are specifically.
Do you want me to tell you?
Yeah.
Okay. So paragraphs 30 to 35, but I've underlined a few things. So I just talked about the strategic planning and the targeted management areas that we're working on. So those are things that we've learned over time as to how to get the best outcomes. We've got an improved approach to monitoring and surveillance. We've also been working with land occupiers to support them. And we've also learned and continue to learn that in some cases, to achieve compliance, that it can take multiple years or seasons to actually get there, because it's not something that can happen overnight. And we've also seen the real value in that approach. So that approach of supporting land occupiers and ensuring that they have the sufficient amount of time to achieve compliance. We have some complexity in our administration of pest compliance, where we need to obtain the details of land occupiers, which is not something that's readily available, and we have to do quite a bit of investigative work at times to understand who is an occupier of a property, because that's not generally public knowledge. And the last thing is just the move towards our outcome-driven pest management. And we, as Richard talked about before, that's increasingly needed. And I've also briefly touched on us undertaking the effectiveness review of our PMP this financial year. So that will give us lots of more lessons learned and help us improve what we do every day. So it's quite exciting.
Thank you, Libby. There's been some really good answers here today. Thank you. From the governance team, do we have a move?
I'll move it.
Cool. So Councillor Laws is going to move. That's one is noting the report and the range of work undertaken. 2, notes, lessons learned, and notes that this report and the operational plan and various information will be sent to the Minister. So we have a mover. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Wilson. Cool. Before I put that motion, is there any discussion?
Yeah, can I speak briefly to this?
Yeah, of course you can.
Microphone. The effectiveness of what the council is doing is as basic a role of pest management as basic gets, really. We've been spending all this money for years and years and years and years measuring what we do, but not whether or not what we're doing is making any difference at all or is achieving any of the outcomes that are set out in the pest management plan. I am delighted to hear that finally that has been recognised after years of moaning around this table. And that obviously is a reflection upon our new chief executive and the team, and I applaud you for it because it's long overdue. And all I would encourage is that happen as soon as possible with as much funding as you require, because at the moment it's difficult to go out and face ratepayers and say to them, we do pest management, oh yeah, and when the obvious question is it working? We go, we don't know, but we can tell you what we've done, and that's not really much of an answer. Fantastic, and I think coming from leadership from you, Richard, I am delighted. It's been a long time to get there. Thank you very much.
Councillor Robertson.
Thank you, and thanks for this report. Well, it is what it is an operational plan. And yeah, as we know, is required by statute. So it's quite prescriptive in what it calls for. I just do want to note, and it was also noted in the ODT, that there is a significant, it's shown, statistical difference from inspections that showed non-compliance. We go back and then we have a significant improvement being shown at this stage. So yeah, we don't count every rabbit, we don't microchip them. We also don't know every mayfly that lives in our streams that we're trying to look after by name either. So that's a normal scientific testing approach to go out and do this type of inspection and see where we're at on the Maclean scale. So yeah, we are doing that and we're showing some results. So to say that we're not is actually not true. And that has been reported in the newspaper as well very recently. However, we're getting high levels of non-compliance still, and that's not acceptable in anyone's boat. So we need to always be looking at how can we improve further and doing that with community. And I really like the approach that's being taken and working in clusters as well. As we know, that works really well, doesn't it? So great to see that you're seeing results there, and thank you for the reporting.
Thank you. No further discussion? Good. We have a mover and a second. Sorry. Okay, so we've got a mover and a second, and no further discussion. Thank you for today's meeting. I put the recommended 3 items. Those 4. Aye.
Aye.
Yes. Carried. Thank you. Okay, so I close today's meeting of the Environmental Implementation Committee. I will close with a Gary Kia Tāti Rangamari Kai Ranga Nina Iwi Otio. Let peace reign on all peoples of the world. Thank you.